Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Hillingdon Council Chamber. My name is David Simmons. I'm the Councillor responsible for education and children's services in the Borough. And this evening I'm going to be hearing 9 petitions which have been submitted to the Council over the last few weeks about the proposals which were under consultation closing on the 25th of January for the future of children's centre services in the Borough. I think it's just important to be clear as we deal with the opening of this meeting. Tonight is not a decision-making meeting. The Council's decision-making process has a number of stages to go through, which will be mostly taking place in public. So what I'm going to be doing this evening is listening to the points that you raise. My colleague here from our Democratic Services team will be making careful notes of those in addition to the points which have been submitted in writing. And Tom Murphy, who is the Council's manager responsible for the consultation process, of course, will be taking note of them as well. And what I'll therefore do is be ensuring that the points that are raised tonight are taken into account before I recommend any course of action to my colleagues in the process of preparing for the Council's budget, which will make the final decision in February later in the month. Tonight's meeting, like most Council meetings, is being broadcast on YouTube. So I'll just make everybody aware of that. The usual ground rules, we do ask, please, can everybody be respectful of others' contributions? We have a number of people speaking this evening, for many of whom this will be the first time speaking at a public meeting. I'm just trying to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to put their point across as best as possible. A couple of formalities we need to deal with are declarations of interest, which I think there are none in my case, and confirm, as is the case with this, many council meetings that will be taking place in public. So, petitions that have been submitted. Every petitioner has a right to speak for up to 5 minutes. And we're going to take those 9 petitions in the order chronologically in which they were submitted. So when the report, which I think a few people have picked up outside, was published, and by law all council meetings have to be publicised 7 days in advance, only 3 of those petitions had actually been submitted, but so far 9 in total have been submitted. So we'll be taking those, I say, in that order. Each of those speakers will get 5 minutes, and for those which relate to a specific ward, and there are 2 of those, Hillside Children's Centre, which is in the Northwood Hills ward, where there are 2 petitions relating to that, and the Charville Children's Centre, which is located in Charville ward, where there is 1 petition. Ward councillors, so your elected representatives from those wards, also have the right to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding the impact on their particular ward. Where there are points of clarification, questions that may arise, excuse me, I'll do my very best to deal with those in turn. So say we're not going to be here to have a debate this evening or to make a decision, but I do want to make sure that the points that you raise are points that I fully understand and that we as an organisation are able to take on board before any final decisions are made about any part of this process. Okay. So I hope that's reasonably clear and concise. I suggest therefore we get underway. So the first petition that was submitted was in the name of Miss Artie Goyal, who has just arrived. Would you like to speak, or given you've just arrived, do you want a few minutes? And we'll give you a few minutes. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is we'll go to the second petition. I'll hear that one first just to give Mrs. Goyle a bit of time to get prepared. So the lead petitioner there is Mrs. Leila Melhem, if that's Melhem. Okay, sorry about the pronunciation there. So you have 5 minutes to say what you'd like to say. You're welcome to sit or stand, whatever is most comfortable for you. Oh, I should mention, we have a traffic light system here, so I think it will go orange when you have 1 minute left. So I won't interrupt you, but you'll know that the 5 minutes is coming towards its end.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, hello. My name is Leila Melhem, and I'm a mother to a 17-month-old girl, Yasmin. I moved to Northwood Hills in June 2015 from outside the borough, not knowing a soul. I had a difficult delivery and my daughter was struggling to feed. By her first week of life, she had lost a dangerous 12% body weight, and I was referred by my health visitor to Hillside Children's Centre, where a wonderful woman called Jo, here today, helped me to get her to feed. From there, I attended many different sessions on a near weekly basis, including bumps and babies, as well as weaning and separation anxiety workshops. The centre is a warm, welcoming place with excellent facilities and supportive, informative staff. It gave me the opportunity to get out of the house, meet other parents in the local area, and to access relevant information. In short, Hillside was a lifeline for me, and I could not have gotten through my first year of motherhood without it. This is my story, but it's not unique. I'm here today speaking on behalf of many more new and future parents in Northwood and Northwood Hills, many of whom, due to the timing of the hearing clashing with children's bedtimes, could not attend today, and who are at risk of having this lifeline taken away from them. To date, 786 people have signed my online petition to save Hillside from closure. Here are some of the reasons why. Firstly, Hillside Children's Centre has strong links with 4 primary schools and 13 nurseries in the area, sharing crucial information such as children deemed to be at risk. If the centre were to close, many of these vulnerable children would slip through the net. Over 100 families attend the centre each week. 360 women a year receive one-to-one breastfeeding support. 300 women a year attend Watford midwifery clinics and 500 Hillingdon midwifery clinics at Hillside. Currently, there is no other setting in the Northwood area to run the Watford clinics. For residents of Northwood and Northwood Hills, no other children's centres in the borough are within walking distance and would require public transport or a car to reach. Hillside's wards have one of the highest numbers of benefit claimants in the borough, so for many this means they could not easily afford to go elsewhere. Furthermore, women who delivered by C-section are unable to drive for 6 weeks. C-section mothers like myself who struggle to feed will not be able to easily access vital breastfeeding support. My husband is a hospital paediatrician and is concerned that this would result in an increase in admissions of newborns to hospital for weight loss and dehydration. Another consequence of this closure would be the sense of isolation and lack of support that new parenthood can bring. We could see an increase in mothers in the area experiencing postnatal depression. Meeting other parents in your community, having the support network is vital. Hillingdon North has the largest concentration of under 5s in the borough. If Hillside were to close, children's centres in Coatford, Hairfield and South Ruislip would be put under additional strain, delivering services to a larger number of families that they do not have the capacity to accommodate. Councillor Simmons, almost exactly a year ago, on the 25th of February, you stated at a council meeting that there would be no children's centre closures. This appears not to be the case. Hillside Council has claimed the proposed closure of Hillside is due to Hillside Children's School not signing the lease. The school refute this. Hillingdon residents were told last month that despite there being no increase in council tax, there would be no cuts to services. These residents feel betrayed in the face of these very clear cuts to services. Furthermore, the online consultation regarding these planned closures was considered by many I've spoken to be complicated, confusing and restrictive, to the point where respondents had no choice but to seemingly support the proposal, in essence a tick box exercise. It would appear the council are putting their desire to have all children's centres in the borough under their control ahead of the needs of residents they serve. All 6 local authority-run children's centres in the borough were ranked as requires improvement by Ofsted and hire expensive agency staff long-term and are restricted to a costly single supplier, whereas the school-led centres are more cost-efficient and ranked higher by Ofsted. The closure of several centres across the borough is not an adequate or rational solution to a cost-saving issue. It is plain and simply a failure to deliver essential services to many of the youngest residents in the borough at arguably the most crucial stage of their development. I urge you to reconsider this proposal and think about the many hundreds of parents and young children who will suffer as a result and who actively oppose the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mellem, for very clearly explaining your perspective, which is extremely helpful. I should mention, although the Northwood Hills councillors are not able to be here this evening because they are at another council meeting, Councillor Duncan Flynn had sent his comments asking that your points be taken very clearly into account, and we make note of that, and that will form part of the record of the meeting. So thank you very much for explaining that very, very clearly. Right, Ms. Goyle, would you like to say what you'd like to say? We'll bring you a microphone, and I'm not sure whether you were here at the start of the meeting. You have up to 5 minutes to say what you'd like to say, and we'll then deal with any questions afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, hello everyone. This is Aarti Goel here. I'm here on behalf of Macmillan Children's Centre. We are here to discuss the petition for changing structure of current children's centre. Parents of babies and young children need support in those early times, as parenthood can be isolating. Sometimes depression and feelings of lack of competence are common when first-time parent. If services are reduced, then these parents' needs may not be met. In Hillingdon, births and populations are still increasing. Mental health issues amongst adults and children are on the increase too. Financially, families are struggling. Housing rentals costs are very high in the Hillingdon area. Parents have to use public transport if they need to travel to children's center that is not local, which will be burden on their finance. It will be discouraging to parents because it will be time-consuming and overwhelming, as they will again have to get used to new environment and staff members. Children's development will be affected too, when parents will not be able to go to children's center because of the distance or lack of confidence. Continuity of service for parents, stable staff members provides a sense of community and safety for vulnerable families. It's a good practice to develop trust so that families can tell us what their real needs are. Parents have to discuss their needs only once if they are able to talk to same staff members each time they visit the children's center. Relationships are strengthened and parents' needs are understood. The staff work together towards the better experience for the parents to visit the children's center, not just providing one-off drop-in session where people don't know the staff members. Parents have the opportunity to make friends and grow to rely on others, as they have consistent professionals who do not pose a threat. By cutting down on the number of children's centers, there will be less training sessions for parents and kids. Also, it will affect the children's playing sessions. All these courses, playing sessions, library, reading activities, etc., help parents to bond with their kids. Hence, the proposed system is not going to be beneficial for parents and children. There will be more number of redundancies which will eventually affect the economy of the country too. Each children's center will lose around 64,000 in 3 years, which will not leave them with enough to run the center. This will be less motivating for the staff members and have a major impact on the families that use the centers. The consultation was available for parents to fill out. However, it was not suitable for all the parents to do online and access it. What would be more suitable is for the people who wish to make these changes to come into each center and talk to the families to gather their opinions. I just like to tell about my story. When I had ectopic pregnancy, some of the children's center was very helpful. I'm sorry. It was very daunting time for me and my family, and everyone was very helpful in the children's center. If they were not there, then I don't know how we have managed and how we have come out of that dark period. So I just want to say, I would like to thank all the staff members of Macmillan Children's Center in Hillingdon for their support. Our special thanks to go to Yvonne, who is a child support worker in Macmillan, who stood by us during our difficult period. Without their support, we would not have been able to come out of it. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you, Ms. Goyle, for sharing both your own personal experience in this context and also setting out your views about the future of the centre. The next petition is from Mr. Christopher Waters. And Mr. Waters, you're here. I know you were here right at the start, so you have up to 5 minutes, and the floor is yours.
I speak on behalf of many hundreds of people who have signed this petition, and also ask that you note the many other petitions that have been submitted and signed by residents in their thousands, which ask the council respectively to reverse its plans to drastically cut the budgets of Hillingdon's children's centres, close 2 of them, and bring in the management of all centres under the council control. Whilst noting that central government funding for Hillingdon has been reduced, it has been the decision of the council to freeze council tax for a further year, which has resulted in the council needing to make budget cuts, with the children's centre feeling the most savage cuts of 41%, representing 1.253 million over the next 3 years. Council's stance is that no services will be cut, and although at the end of the process the council will be able to show that there are still some children's centres left in the borough, residents believe that the cuts of this magnitude will lead to a reduction of services being offered, as well as a reduced capacity within individual children's centres. As the severity of cuts will mean there are staff reductions, and staff are the people that are delivering the services and bring support and advice, and in some cases hope to families and children. The review of children's centres in Hillingdon, conducted between March and June 2016, has resulted in the course of action the Council now intends to take. However, the findings of this review have never been disclosed by this Council to the children's centres themselves or to the Hillingdon residents. On the basis of this secret review, Hillingdon has already made the decision to cut services. The decision to make cuts to the services that occur, and therefore it appears to one and all that no amount of concern from the users of the 18 centres, no amount of petitions, no amount of signatures on these petitions will change the Council's stringent cuts to the budgets of the 18 centres and potential closures of 2. The proposed changes which the Council plans to make will indeed change the way children's centres are able to operate. Hillingdon's stance is all will be well, as the so-called efficiencies will mean that services are protected. However, there is absolutely no evidence which the Council has to offer which will support this. Despite the smokescreen of long-worded speeches which I've heard in the emails I've seen, residents are fully aware that less money will result in staff redundancies. Centres which are operated by schools will not be able to maintain the level of service they now deliver, as schools support their partner children's centres in many forms. My child's Cherry Lane Centre is within the most deprived area of the borough, as judged by various government assessments. These cuts will be devastating to our centre, which has been described very forcefully by a long-serving governor of the school. One of the services which will be cut will be the Saturday Stay and Play group, which uses the services of the school to enable it to continue, thus highlighting the effect on the ground of the Council's proposal and making the leaders' confident assertion of no cuts to services look less and less convincing to Hillingdon residents. In closing, I ask the Council to look at the overwhelming evidence which supports the work of early years providers and children's centres in particular. They are following the government's agenda of supporting young lives so that more costly services are not needed later in life. In Hillingdon, which is a borough of extremes, where some areas are assessed as being some of the most deprived in the country, they need adequate funding to allow them to continue in their sometimes life-changing work. They do not need savage cuts to make them more efficient. I therefore ask the Council to reverse the cuts and protect the work of all our centres.
Thank you, Mr. Waters, for your contribution this evening. That was again very, very clear. The next speaker is going to be in relation to the centre, the Charville Centre, and I understand Mrs. Sam Gemmell, is that correct speaking? Gemmell, is that right? Will be speaking on behalf of Mr. Coleshill, who was the organiser of the petition.
Yes, my name is Sam Gemmell. I'm one of the assistant head teachers at Charville Academy, and I've been involved in the line management and the supporting the work of the Children's Centre for the last 7 years, or there and thereabouts. I think it's apparent that your residents are not happy by the very fact that we have 8 or 9 petitions here today, and I think that's something that we would urge you to really consider as part of this process. We at Charville don't feel that this has been a consultation at all. It's been something that's been done to us. The views, I think someone else has already mentioned, the views haven't been taken into account along the journey. You have your say, and again, we don't feel that's been a fit-for-purpose document that has allowed residents to properly express their views. And the other thing we feel is that there hasn't been a transparency in the process at all. you mentioned the report or the review that hasn't been shared with us. We've received a summary of the review that's never been shared with us. So I just wanted to say we feel we've had a hugely successful relationship working with and line managing the Children's Centre over that 7 and indeed more years. We've worked in partnership with all the staff, and we've put forward to have a centre 7 years ago in the ward to support not just Charville but other primary schools, which we believe it has done so very effectively. We chose to have it because it identified the need within the area, and those needs have only increased over the years. Our staff have supported families through a huge range of initiatives, and that has provided a welcoming place, a one-stop shop, a place where families, and you've heard some of the individual stories today. Unfortunately, we haven't got parents here to share those stories, but those stories across the borough would be 100-fold. The LA capacity to develop the services, you say in your document that the LA will be able to develop services, improve the services that our families are in receipt of, and we would strongly doubt whether that is the case. The huge cuts that you plan to make, 41% of cuts. We understand that cuts must be made. We're part of a school. We know that cuts are coming and increasingly so. But 41% across children's centres is going to have a devastating effect upon the services that families in the localities receive. I do apologise. You propose closing 2 centres due to the lease negotiations being stalled. However, a number of centres haven't progressed on their lease. The change of model or expansion of purpose that you propose may determine that further negotiations are required across all centres that have a lease or are in negotiation with the local authority. Again, that brings in the lack of transparency in the whole process, because we understand that we're not the only centre that have not had a lease. And as I mentioned earlier, you provided a summary of a 0 to 19 review without providing the full report of the findings. So we've just found the whole process that has been done to the services right across the local authority has not been supportive, has not taken into account the residents and, most importantly, the children. Hundreds of families, thousands of families across the local authority have benefited from our centre and from other centres, and their life chances have been drastically improved because of that. Early intervention, we know through so much research, has a drastic impact on the life chances of children, and you are taking that away by reducing those services. So we would urge you to reconsider your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gemmill, for setting out your perspective on behalf of the Charville Primary Academy and the Charville Children's Centre. Our next petition is submitted by Ms. Joanne Moss, and I believe it's Sandy Soames is going to speak, who's here. Thank you very much. Microphone is coming to you. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Hello, my name's Sandy Soames. I've been asked to come here by Hairfield Children's Centre, but this is about all the children's centres in the whole borough. I'm a governor at Hairfield Primary Schools, and I'm also linked to the Children's Centre. We're a volunteer force. We don't get paid. We include parents, teachers, head teachers, and the manager of the Children's Centre. And one of our jobs is to look at the regular impact reports from the centre. They detail all the work being done by their staff with the funding available to them. It's enormous. They work extremely hard. The work is impressive. The impact reports are impressive, and they're evidence of a very solid track record in supporting all our very many vulnerable families in Hairfield.
and beyond. On the subject of head teachers and line managers, head teachers are undoubtedly the best managers for these centres. We see the benefit in work being done for children and families right the way through from their very first months to SATs and beyond. I've seen it at Hairfield, I've seen the way it works, and it really does work. Everyone right across the board knows these families, and this means that everyone knows exactly how to target their resources right where they're needed. The school business manager on site ensures that financial management is sound across the board. Resources are shared. All the staff have a real investment in supporting the children who they know well and the families who they know well. They develop the confidence and the skills of vulnerable families, in fact, of all families. It's not just vulnerable families. As we've heard from so many people tonight, it's about all of us at some stage in our lives who needs that support and need that help. Some years ago, we were asked to step up as a lead centre for the north of the borough, a locality that includes the threatened Hillside. And according to information presented at the meeting on the 9th of December, it has the highest number of under fives in the whole borough. The staff of Hairfield and the linked children's centres have since delivered exceptional services for its families. They've now been told that the newly introduced hub and spoke model requires a choice of hub based on the geography of the locality. Now, a cynic would question why the LA has chosen to select 3 hubs that have Ofsted judging required improvement when there are equally accessible centres that have a very good rating. Maybe the decision makers simply hadn't had the time to look at the relevant judgments and work it out for themselves. Maybe this explains why representatives from the LA called everyone to a meeting on the 9th of December totally unprepared to answer questions from the many head teachers, managers and governors who were facing them, who turned out on that night to meet them. The message from that meeting was that many aspects of this decision were going to be non-negotiable, although it appeared that no one had really decided yet what those non-negotiable proposals were going to be. It appeared that they were going to be made, or plans for the next few months of management by the LA. They didn't know how it was going to be managed by the LA. They couldn't tell them. They just knew it was going to be managed by the LA, not by the head teachers. They did, however, have a very precise figure for budget reductions that this would all achieve. There was no explanation whatsoever about how that figure was reached. One thing we can't guess is the cost if thousands of apparently small vulnerabilities in very small people across the borough are not recognised until they become fully diagnosed as big people's crises. They can then be counted and costed in pounds, shillings and pence. Maybe you should invest this saving of your budget just in case you need it in future years. The whole process has been totally flawed. You are dealing with dedicated professionals. They don't need bullying. They understand there are funding problems. Please make use of their expertise and their knowledge and start to involve them in the decisions. Ofsted's lower rating for some of them has been made partly because of poor information coming from the LA. They wouldn't share that information. How can we possibly trust this LA not to run Hairfield and other children's centres into the ground? And if they fail, how can we, there is going to be rise to a challenge in future years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Sandy Soames, very clearly expressed. Next speaker, the petition was submitted by Mrs. Rebecca Fennell, We have Ms. Joy Mason, who's going to speak on this item, and this one relates to Hillside.
Thank you. My name is Joy Mason, and I'm the chair of Hillside Junior School and the vice chair of Hillside Infant School. And as both schools, we've been strong advocates of the Children's Centre, and it's good to hear another governor talk about the strong relationship that governors, head teachers have had with the Children's Centre and how much they value the services that they do. At Hillside, we felt that it was so important that we actually approved the knocking down of a bungalow and the loss of income for the Children's Centre to be there, because we felt it was so important to us and of value to us. We've always been committed to the security of the Children's Centre while funding existed, and only asked for clarity about what would happen if the funding stopped, and that is the only thing that Hillside have not actually made a statement about. It is true from the meetings that we've had with other governors and head teachers that we are further ahead than some other centres about actually appointing a solicitor, and having discussed this in all of our recent governing body meetings, which you will find record of in our minutes. We feel it's really important because, for example, Hillside Infant School has a higher proportion of children entering school that have below average level of development, good level of development, which means that they have more to catch up in the time they're in school to meet the requirements that they need. Northwood Hills area also has a higher proportion of under fives than anywhere else in the north of the borough, and this is why we've been asked to increase the infant school and then the junior school later on from a 2 to a 3 form entry, recognising that increase in the number of 5. And this is going to be at a time when the impact of the Children's Centre would be lost. The Children's Centre's Ofsted report said there were a higher proportion of single parent families than anywhere else in the country. 30% of the children live in a household supported by work-less benefits. At a time when schools are measured on the work they do with our pupil premium children to close the gap, the closure of a children's centre that helps parents make an early start and gives them support will make this harder for the school to do and make that gap even stronger to build up. In fact, the records say that we're 7 out of 18 wards with the highest number of people with benefits there. It's also clear from talking to other head teachers that other centres feel that they might be overwhelmed if the numbers that come from Hillside try to go to other centres, although we've heard from parents that they would find that very difficult with the transport links and the fact that very young mothers can't actually drive at that beginning part. And when people are at their most vulnerable, that's actually the time when we would need to help them most. The management of the Hillside Children's Centre has been considered very successful, and it does seem very difficult for us to understand. Closing a centre of excellence which has good relationships with governors and head teachers. We note as governors the amount of time our head teachers have invested in the work of the Children's Centre. They feel it a priority in their work to actually develop the children and the families in the area and the support it gives. And one of the reasons for that excellence is that strong working relationship with the staff in the centre and the staff in the school and the governors that work them. And the fact that those children and parents are so well known is really important. The school spent considerable time involved in that management and organisation, and this will be lost under the spoke and hub alternative. And this will be detrimental to the community of Northwood and Northwood Hills, but it will be detrimental to all parents in all parts of the borough, as you will lose that volunteer work that actually is given, the number of hours that you can't actually estimate from the value of their work and time you haven't got on paper. But you will actually find that will have a dramatic effect on the effectiveness of the children's centres. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms Mason, for presenting your petition. I think the next petition is from Ms Amelia Connolly, who wasn't here at the start. Just want to check. She's not coming and hasn't sent an alternative. So, Mr Coogan, the next speaker. Mr Coogan's here. So the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Matthew Coogan. I have two children, one with quadriplegic dystonic cerebral palsy, and the other child who was diagnosed at the age of 3 as to be on the autistic spectrum. My wife, married to a beautiful lady, Nicole, she was diagnosed in 2014 with ME and fibromyalgia, which led to her to being bedbound. Now, if it wasn't for the work of Cope for Children's Centre and in a lot, Marianne, who's here today, not only would my family have fallen apart, I would have lost my home as it's attached to my job. I would have lost my job. I would have lost my pension attached to my job. The children's centres, I've looked at all of your proposals and I've looked at the everything that you're proposing in the hub and spoke system. The managers at these centres aren't just managers. They're qualified teaching staff. Removing those teaching staff from each of those centres to replace it with one staff in to cover 3 centres is an absolute disgrace. They don't just manage the team, they deliver services. When we attended the early bird course, that was delivered by Alison, who was the manager. That wasn't delivered just by a member of staff, that was the manager delivering that. The managers at these centres know the local people in their area, know what services are needed, know what the families want and who the most vulnerable are, like many other of these petitioners have said today. We did attend Cope for Children's Centre, and I don't understand how you propose to run the Children's Centre at Cope for Children's Centre. That is an integral part of the school building. The protection of my children. My child attends Copeford Infant School. How do you propose that the head teacher ensures the protection of my child when they have no authority on parts of their building that have access directly to my children? How can you protect my child to ensure that there is going to be no one entering that school building without the head teacher knowing who they are and ensure that they've been correctly vetted? Secondly, who's going to pay the electricity bill? Is that going to come out of the school budget? Is my child now going to receive less services from the school because they're paying for the electricity and the maintenance and the upkeep of those buildings? And the closure of Hillside, those children, those that can commute, are going to come down and come further down. Copeford again has a large number of children that attend their centre. I just don't understand the council's policy on this. Uxbridge Centre closing. There's another at least 5,000 homes left to be built on St Andrew's Park across the way here. Where do you propose that those under 5s from those families go? Again, like I also said, the consultation, it didn't give people the opportunity to voice their views on the hub and spoke system. It didn't give the option of, do you want to keep the status quo? Do you want to deliver it as it is? And there are already good practices in place between these centres, lots of good practices. And like my petition stated, I agree with a hub and spoke system in principle, but without the reduction of the staff. Sharing good practices across Children's Centre will only make them better, but only if the staffing levels and the way they're maintained and run is kept, the status quo is kept. And my other question is, who is the local authority going to get in to run these centres? Is this just going to be another red herring like the NHS? Let's get in business managers, pay over the odds for them, and in 10 years' time go, well, that doesn't work. We're spending more money. We're spending more money on business managers than we're spending on services. The service users, I as a service user do not really know what your proposals are, what the services are going to still be there, how the provision will be affected, and how exactly it will send money. So I don't believe the consultation will be valid because you haven't provided enough information for people to make a informed decision on their views to this. The council has spent a lot of money recently fighting central government on the expansion of Heathrow runway. Not that I'm against it, for it or against it, but my point is this. The reason they do that is because they say they listen to their residents. Well, look at all of the petitioners that are here today. If the council goes ahead with these changes, then clearly they do not listen to their residents, they do not respect their wishes, and, you know, this is only going to have a negative impact on children across this borough, and it's only the vulnerable that are going to be affected. Once again, as always with government cuts, it is the vulnerable that are affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coogan, for responding in detail. I'm here to listen tonight. The purpose of a consultation is to listen, so we will take into account what's said. The last petition to be submitted is by Rusa Leto, who's here. So you've heard all the other petitioners. You know the form. You have up to 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
So hello, my name is Rue. I'm a parent of one daughter, Tegan, who I go to Collins Manor Children's Centre with, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the parents, many of whom are here, and the staff from that centre. As our petition states, we are against the current proposals of budget cuts and placing of children's centres under council control rather than schools, and have reservations about the creation of a hub and satellite centres, just as many here have already stated. Whilst we see the value, or some value, in joined-up services, our experiences tell us that parents don't really want to travel to other children's centres. Many have mentioned that before as well here tonight. For a lot of our families, it involves taking maybe 2 buses or walking. I don't personally drive, and many others don't either. More importantly, parents have often built up trust and a relationship with their local children's centre staff, and they may not have the confidence to use services elsewhere. This is especially true for vulnerable families, but from speaking to parents, this is an issue raised by many regardless of their family situation. There are many who worry about how they will be able to have the same level of trust that they have with current staff, with rotating staff, or new staff members, or staff members they are not familiar with. This worry extends to the possible job losses, about which both the staff and parents feel understandably nervous about. There are many existing trusted relationships between staff and parents that could be destroyed by the current job cuts and the proposals. If these confidential connections disappear, the bar to raise sometimes serious social and domestic issues is very high, and the prevention and support that is needed will simply disappear. This will undoubtedly create issues that will be far more costly to the council in the long run than keeping the children's centres and their services as they are now. Again, a lot of people have mentioned that later on you'll pay for these cuts. You know, you're not really making savings now, you will pay for them later. We think that whilst it is essential that children's centres target vulnerable families, there are a high number of families that are not considered as vulnerable, who are just as much in need of the services children's centres currently provide. After having children, parents may experience loneliness, anxiety and depression, or may need support in another way. Children's centres enable people to build a community in a culture which often doesn't do this naturally. It is vital that all parents have access to services, whether they are tackling extremely specialist problems, or if they are just having a bad day and need somewhere to go to have interaction with other parents, or for their children to benefit from the company of other children, removed from the usual domestic location, which can sometimes be a difficult and challenging environment for anybody. There are an incredible number of stories from families about the positive impact that Colman Children's Centre has had on them and their family, and in some cases it has been a life-saving support. Having read some of the comments made by Councillor Simmons about the proposals, I was particularly struck by this one about the current children's centre services and how, and I quote here, there are programs which are proven in many very good quality studies, including randomized control trials, to be a waste of money and to achieve nothing for the people who use them. This, to me, is an extremely worrying statement and betrays a complete lack of understanding how these programs work currently. Not only would I like to know what these good quality studies are, but I also fully challenge the notion that any program is a waste of money or achieves nothing. There is not a parent that I have spoken to that would agree with this statement made by Councillor Simmons. In the early years of childhood and the challenges of parenthood those years bring, nowhere and nothing that provides a full, safe and comprehensive access to social interaction between children, social interaction between parents, early year specialists, early learning, advice, and most importantly, just play, can be deemed worthless. We hope the Council reconsiders their current proposals and takes into account the negative effects these changes would have on the community and the parents and the children in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rue, for again expressing your view. So that brings us to the conclusion of the 9 petitions that are on the agenda to be heard this evening. Now, inevitably, it's not possible to respond in detail to all the points that are raised, but as you've probably seen, the 2 council officers who are here this evening have been scribbling furiously to make sure that when the consultation responses are collated and the council makes its decision, those points are both made available to those making the decisions, but also are taken into account. So there will be the opportunity for a more detailed response at that stage. But there are a couple of things that do strike me that I will mention. The distance point, a number of people mentioned. Clearly that is an important consideration. How far do you have to travel to access services? This is not about personal stories, but I'm a parent of a very young child. I have used my vaguely local children's centre. I do understand what that issue is about, and some of the circumstances people described have resonance with my own personal experience. A number of people asked questions about the nature of services that were provided. And I think we need to be clear at the moment that the proposals that are under consultation have 2 sides to them. The first is that the council is intending to reassume the direct management of the centres, so back to the situation that used to exist. And so clearly at that point what will happen is the staff that work in the existing centres will be line managed through the council as opposed to line managed through the schools at which they're currently based. And the purpose of that is to enable the opportunity to look at how that can be run collectively in a more efficient manner. And I understand not everybody will agree with that. It's an approach which the council has taken to a number of other services, and so far, for the most part, with good effect. A number of people asked questions about budgets and where we are with that. Now clearly, as a council, we have to set a budget each year, and in each year we need to make that budget balanced. We're legally obliged to do that, and we look to do that in the best way that we can by reviewing every aspect of service that the council provides. Children's centres, care for the elderly people, care for people with learning disabilities, transport, libraries, education. And whilst I am concerned about the impact it will always have on individuals, I make no apology for the fact on behalf of our residents that we will always do that, because we'll always try and see if there's a better, more efficient way to do what we can. A number of people asked about the review. Now, the review, as I understand it, has been an internal management review. It's not something that's involved external consultants writing a report, not somebody we paid to come in and do that. But I will look into that, and I will make sure that that point is absolutely clear in my response when I make it, when it comes to making recommendations about this. Safeguarding was raised. Mr. Coogan, I think you raised that in particular, the question about, well, how do we know people on site are people who are appropriately vetted? Well, again, in the short term, clearly the plan is that the staff who are currently working there will continue to be the staff who are working there. And the obligations for children's centres are exactly the same as they are for schools. So people are required to go through the same process of vetting. So children's centres, I know, have staff from the NHS, from the council, from a number of other organisations in and out of them on a regular basis. And the requirements are the same for all of those people in that they need to meet that standard. And the last point that was raised, the question about, well, are there some programmes that are good and some that are not? So there is a national programme of research. It's based upon a methodology that was developed in the United States from the programme, the Sure Start programme as originally was designed there. And there is a specific centre at Warwick University whose purpose is to develop research in this area that examines the effectiveness of various programmes in the field of early intervention, primarily focused on the development of children. And the aim of that is to say, if you have only a limited amount of money available, and we do have only a limited amount available, what programmes are there out there which have proven effectiveness? So if, I'm just picking some of the examples people mentioned about issues of poverty and deprivation in the areas served by the children's centres, issues around learning disabilities. What programmes are there out there, amongst many that may claim to be good for that particular application, that have a proven track record of making a difference to those children and their families? And so clearly a decision which we need to make as an organisation, if we have a choice about which of those things we aim to fund, then we need to fund one that we know will make the biggest difference, rather than one which perhaps doesn't have a proven outcome. I'm a trustee of a charity called the Early Intervention Foundation, which at a national level is responsible for coordinating this information and disseminating it, and children's centres, being main users of that research and information, are a pretty fundamental part of that target audience, really. Which is not to say that programmes that don't have a proven effectiveness in a particular area are necessarily not going to turn out to be good for something else. However, if we know that we are looking to provide a particular type of support to parents facing particular circumstances, clearly we need to make sure that what we're spending the money on is the thing that we know will make the difference, as opposed to something else that might not. So at that point, all I can really say is thank you very much indeed to the petitioners for taking the time to come in and share your views. As I said, what you've contributed this evening has been very carefully written down, and we will ensure that as the council comes forward to its decision-making process, that it's fully taken into account. So thank you all very much indeed for your time, and that closes the meeting. I don't think you were present at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Edgington, when, as was clear, there are a number of petitions which relate to all wards, which do not create a right for councillors to speak, and there are petitions relating to two specific wards, where in one case the ward councillor had sent in a written statement, which has been noted for the record. Thank you very much indeed for coming, and on behalf of the council, I wish you a safe journey home.